At the beginning of the meditation, I could feel my butterflies in my stomach because this is such an important topic to me that, I really want to do it justice. And it's also such a big topic that it's difficult to do it justice. So, but first of all, I really like Bhante Sangharakshita's liking for definitions. He's just so clear of defining his terms. So before we, as a way of starting, how do you define sustainability? What does that mean to you, Dhammapitika?
For me, sustainability, to live sustainable, is living in harmony with a longer time perspective.
Yeah. It's a bit like you said in your meditation, considering metta for the unborn.
Yeah, in the work of the work that reconnects of John Macy, we are learning to develop imaginations up to the 7th generation, so for 200 years. And in the beginning, I didn't dare to think about future for 200 years. Is there hope? Is there future? What are we doing with all subjects of our fear for extinction?
Yeah.
It's very encouraging to also develop kindness for the children and the children of our children. Yeah. Great.
I very support that, and I link it a bit to, apparently there's an old Norwegian tradition, maybe just a couple of generations back, when in a farmer say, when I, as a grandfather, maybe, I'll have my first grandchild born, and I would go into the forest and I would mark out a few good trees, and then I would take the bark off so they would season. And then the following winter, I would fell the trees and store them. And so they would dry for 15 to 20 years. And when my grandchild would need to build their own home, they would be ready.
In these difficult years of Corona, there was quite a lot of news about Jonas Salk, who found out the polio vaccine, and of course he didn't want any patent, but he gave his invention out of full generosity for mankind. Then his life work was with the question how to be a good ancestor. Grachnik has written a book. It was published beginning of this year, How to Become a Good Ancestor. How to be a good ancestor, and how is that in life? Well, I'm father, I'm grandfather. What does it mean to be to be a good ancestor, and how to live my life as a Dhammachari, and with my my strong wish to live ethically, and but also in responsibility for future. For future generations, and so it's helpful, I feel, to have a longer time perspective.
And to me, sustainability has that kind of longitudinal, and it also has a kind of a breadth, like at the chairs event for 2 years ago. We were very clear that we wanted to include both environmental and social sustainability. And my friend Jeremy Williams has also encouraged me to really look at this triple bottom line of sustainability, of actually looking at the climate, looking at the people, and looking at the economy. And I think having spent a few years living, working both in Triratna cooperatives and team-based livelihoods, and I really just see the importance of going into whatever we do in a way that we can live, as it were, sustainable lives, and we can keep up our idealism.
Yeah, it's yeah. Of course, I understand that ecological and social and economic and political is all connected with each other. When Bhante is encouraging us to raise our voices and to protest against doing harm for others, it's doing harm both in the individual level, but also in terms of systems.
Yeah.
Then I am on the level of an activist.
Yeah.
And well, I show you. I took my artificial limb here.
Great.
Limbs in India. I lived in India for quite a while, and making artificial limbs there was a huge lack of artificial limbs. 100,000 of amputees had no limbs. So there is a lot to do, and due to political, social, ecological, and many reasons, there were not enough limbs. But so how to keep your emotions, how to keep your eyes dry when seeing a situation which is so difficult. For me, the answer was love and reverence. And when in terms of ecology, I read about Arno Naas. Naas is a Norwegian philosopher, a mountaineer. If you see the YouTube films in which he is as an activist in Norway, for me is a hero. It's the Ambedkar for ecology. Naas introduced the word deep ecology, rather than only the superficial ecology. And in terms of superficial ecology, we could say that is that's acting, that's protesting, and the deep ecology is also entering our inner life, our inner perspective, in search for acknowledging what's there in terms of fear and pain. So a deep ecology requires deep listening. And well, so I'm an activist from youth. When I was a child already was a member of Amnesty, and I was a member of Greenpeace and this and that. And I try to help a lot of people with a disability all over the world. But my life as Dhammapitika is, I would say, it's fueling. It's a reciprocal fueling. And my life as Dhammapitika is not only as an activist, but my life as a Dhammapitika is as a Dhammapitika. So developing my inner process of developing the serenity. And so I had to learn to live with the situation that, well, when I saw all these entities, we can't change worlds. So what we can change is our attitude towards the situation as it is. And that's with love. That's with reverence. That's with gratitude. And well, that's a short saying, but Arno Naas really helped me to find the spirituality back in my life as an activist. We are now in Holland in a situation where a lot of trees have to be cut, more than 800 for expanding a motorway. And I'm there as an activist. I write to government and this and that. And I'm going to climb in the tree to get it protected. I'm there with my name, Dhammapitika. But I'm also there with kindness. So I'm also with metta to the tree cutters there. I'm also with metta to the neoliberal government who's decided to cut these trees. I don't want to be an activist with hate, but with love.
Yeah, that's lovely. As a little fact, you know, Arne Næss, and just a Dhammachari, of course, that means, to those who don't know, that's you're ordained into the Triratna Buddhist order. But Arne Næss is also one of my heroes. And today I received an invitation to, there's a little group that once a year go up to Tvergastein, Arne Næss's little cottage up on the mountains of Norway. Yeah. And they have a little seminar of a weekend, of people being engaged with sustainability. I was just so pleased today to receive the invitation to go in the autumn. But I'm curious, Dhammapitika, what was it that triggered your all this activism? Was there anything that kind of made you join Amnesty or Greenpeace the first time?
Well, I think with the Pratica Samutpada, I am born in a family with a social engagement for caring for the poor, or caring for serving others. So my strive for a better world, strive to contribute to a better world, my no shame to go for ideals. And to have ideals in my life and to go for it. So when I was in India and I was living in Jaipur with the Jains, very ahimsa oriented doctors who were making artificial limbs with the ideal to serve everyone, but not enough. It was my inspiration that an ideal is not something to obtain immediately or at once, but to practice patience and to do that. And in my further life, I am happy, I'm inspired by meeting others who have ideals too, like me. It's like a fire, which is enlightened by the other, also by us in the Sangha. So we lighten the fire in between us. And that's when I met you in Adesthana about ecology, not only as activist, but as a Dhammachari concerned with the matter and with deep ecology. Then something resonates. And that fire is still alive. But I must say, well, my private preceptor is here. It's Oxantivadin. And so my name, Dhammapitika, it's from the Dhammapada, where it says, he who drinks in the Dhamma lives happily with a serene mind. And so it's a bit of a challenge for me, because how to live happily with a serene mind, the very difficulty we have, for instance, in regards to climate change. When I see the forest, when we hear about the biodiversity, if we hear about the temperature, if we hear about all the suffering, you and I also contribute to. I mean, we have dirty hands, haven't we? And so how to live with a serene mind? And then, well, I'm only short in the order. I'm now almost 3 years ordained. And for me, to have a spiritual path in the otherworldly realm of the transcendental, and let's forget about climate change in the world, I cannot forget that I am born on earth. So, and so I have a transcendental path, I have a transformative process, but not to enter in the, I'm not an otherworldly oriented person. To be only a worldly oriented person, so as an activist, it's neither the way. So when I read this, well, there are many books on eco-dharma, and the people who attended, we can send your literature. There are many beautiful books. But it's like a double bodhisattva ambition we have now with 28 of us, because we have the ambition of finding as ways as to how to develop and emerge the spiritual and richness and the myth to unfold, and at the same time with both feet in the mud. I mean, Norway is very rich, but Norway is very rich because of all the fossil energy you have taken out. So you are putting now your transition energy with subsidies paid by the fossils. And like in Holland is very rich because of the gas. And in this Zoom session, maybe we use a Google data center, which is polluting the environment too.
Yeah. So there are so many interesting issues to get into, and I hope that we will get into several of them. But I was curious. Maybe you'd like to start a bit with that myth you're talking about, because you say you're not a transcendental person, or that's not your primary motivation, if I hear. Though you have a myth that there is this this Dharma life. So, because I'm very occupied by that at the moment, and in a sense, the focus of the thesis that I'm writing about sustainability is how, if at all, or how we could draw on our transcendental perspectives to inspire a sustainable being and living. So with that in the background, I was very curious to hear what you said. So could you say a bit more about what your myth is and how you live it in your everyday life?
Well, as a Buddhist, going for refuge to the Buddha, the Dharma, the Sangha, my life to unfold with the path in which enlightenment to enrich, which is has this compassionate insight element. It's in my life where I'm born with my feet on the earth, with my responsibility as an earth civilian. I'm living here, and my last years, I have gone through acknowledgements. I would say I've tried to be as honest as possible on my knees for my little shrine, to look and to see what's in me, what's my discomfort, what's my uneasiness, what's my pain, what's my situation. And I have tried to, as deepest as I could, to see facts as they are. So I did study about the CO2 ppms, about the permafrost, about biodiversity. I read the Club of Rome, etc. I read IPCC. I read about what happens. I mean, it's not too bad when it's a bit more sunny in Norway. I mean, is that a problem? But what's the problem when 1 or 2 or 3 degrees warming globally? Second, I had to try to, and I'm only on a little phase, but I tried to understand what is it to be human? What is it to carry my human heritage as a Homo sapiens, our mess? When reading Harari Yuval, the ecocide, which is on our, so how to deal with that? I cannot deny it. And then my own footprint, my frequent flying in the past, well, my little understanding. I did not know so sharply that I was stealing the future of the next generations. I didn't know it in my heart. I had to learn to understand Greta Thunberg. So I had to grow in my discomfort. I had to grow in feeling guilt, feeling doubt, fear. I had to learn not to be an eco-moralist, to say this or that, you should not fly, or this or that. I had to struggle as to what to share with my children. They have a right to be young and live life, innocent, I mean, haven't they? So what to share with whom? How to communicate about climate when not turning into a mood of depression. So how to express words properly, the fourth precept. How to stay away from ecofascism, a struggle Ananas also had. And I had a tendency, well, I'm born or trained an engineer, so he's acting. So if I act, I feel better. If I join the BAM, if I do shorter showering, or I eat vegan, and or I join in tree preventing cutting, I feel better. So I had to learn to stay away from guilt and stay away from uncertainty. And so that's acknowledgement has been an important phase for me as a Dharmachari. And I've seen it as a painful process, but and now I'm reading and following course with Ojana Macy's work, and now I see that acknowledgement of this pain, of this fear, of this uncertainty as to how to cope with this, fully, truly. That's the first phase, to find courage, to find perspective. And so the first phase is acknowledgement in a deeper sense. And then, well, this meditation started with me. At the retreat center in Metta Vihara, which is a very sustainable center. I mean, we are producing electricity and it's very green and very eco and very bio. But if you look good, then as far in distance, we see a nuclear power station. And I have found it very difficult when I left the meditation room and we went to the beautiful garden, which is very eco. I mean, Stephen is here on the Zoom and, well, it's his garden, I would say. But then I saw this nuclear energy station, and then I was aware of a negative thought about, oh, how sad, what a pity, how wrong. And I was condemning and judging the situation. And I really did a week retreat on only looking to the nuclear power station near the Metta Vihara retreat center and trying not immediately to react with the senses of thought. So to stop and realize, to be in between and wait. And so also the nuclear power station. Well, also the tree cutter and the whale hunter. And they're part of what it is. And so the acknowledgement helps me to make connection with all included, rather than pushing it away.
Yeah. So it sounds like your myth, in a sense, of quite a realistic eco-sattva or a bodhisattva. A bodhisattva being that of a being on the course to enlightenment. Is it that that is your part of your myth, like a bodhisattva or eco-sattva that's just really rooted in the practicalities of this world? Is that right? Is that the image that I get?
Okay. Yes, and the wish for serenity, the wish for peace, the wish for. But I mean, it's like with Martin Luther King, how I can have a serene mind, how I can have a peaceful heart when my neighbor is suffering so much. We have to solve that situation, not by denying the neighbor, but to relate to the neighbor.
Yeah.
And so Martin Luther King expressed it very wisely, the inclusiveness. And when the Dalai Lama is saying, well, Chinese government is not only my enemy, but it's also my friend. I mean, in terms of climate, well, we can, as an activist, make enemies very easily. We can polarize very easily. But, well, I learned from Ananas, I learned from Jack Hammarskjöld, I learned, well, but from Sagarachita, to keep the hands open and to connect. And the other thing is, I don't know how you experience that, but say my life with ideals. So I have to learn that the situation which I strive for is not as it is now. And it's easy to, as a risk to develop frustration or angerness or negativity in myself, which is connected to the other. And so I did quite a lot of study on what's the psychology behind someone with ideals, well, like myself. And I think idealism is partly fed by deficiency if our own shortcoming and we practice to others. I mean, I'll make it very simple. Well, I work in healthcare, but I had to learn to care for myself too. And if I not learn to help, to work for myself, to serve for myself, it's easy to project the need to others. And, so the climate enemy is, it's outside, it's the hunter, the killer, the this and the that, but it's also in ourselves. So I feel the path of peace, the inner work is fueling the external work. So living as an activist is enriched as a Dhammachari. But on the other hand, the climate, it's a tantric work for me as a in my Dhammachari work, in my Dhammachari life. It's a reciprocal fuel.
Well, and I think in that work, I find it very helpful to have myths, have a or several myths to navigate by. And I think the very first myth I stumbled into when I, at my first Triratna encounter in Manchester in 1991, was that of the New Society. Ratnaguna was there starting a university class that autumn, and his topic was the Noble Eightfold Path, and he mentioned the New Society. And I was on my third year as a management science study, and I had already been interested by the Mondragon cooperative. I was interested in kibbutz, and it was just so obvious that the way the conventional teaching just wasn't fair.
That's it.
And so this idea of actually a new society built on this idea, that was a myth that, you know, was very strong when I was helping building the Manchester Buddhist Center, and is still very strong. And within that, there's also the myth of Avalokiteshvara, the visualization practice that I was given when I was ordained. And this idea, and I remember at one point after my ordination, I was working quite hard at the Manchester Buddhist Center, and at the time, Kamala Sheila was visiting our community, and I remember, you know, coming up into the community one evening and just being tired and frustrated and just down at heart, and it's just so much to do and so few to do it, and how to cope with it. And he was asked, well, so what's your sadhana? What's your visualization practice? And I said, well, it's the 1,000-arm Avalokiteshvara practice. And he said, so what did you expect? And of course, the key aspect of the myth is this monk, you know, who really wants to save all sentient being, and he really works hard at it. He's really good at it. but even when he looks out over the impact of the world, he's so disheartened that he loses faith, and he's just torn apart. And in that moment of anguish, he just cries out to this bigger force of Amitabha, his kind of spiritual mentor. And of course, Amitabha does come to his rescue and reconfigures him into 11 or 10 heads, 1,000 arms, and puts his head on top. And to me, it's just a beautiful it's this metaphor to remember when I really feel it's not working. There are all these, just recently we had a little crisis in our municipality city. A very competent green kind of local MP was voted out because of some issue. And I thought, it's just really struck me. And you have to remember that, well, there is a bigger context. I do what I can, and then I let the universe unfold somehow.
Yeah, I think it's great to say Gunaketu. I mean, how to be creative if we have no imagination of what we are striving for. I mean, the imagination is so important, and so so if there is no imagination what we strive for, how to be creative to act for that.
Yeah.
I noticed, I don't know how is that for you, but in the last years, well, every year we have more, say, records of the climate change in terms of loss, well, the 9 boundaries on Earth, and we are crossing. So I noticed that, do I have a future perspective? Do I have future hope? Do I dare to think about 200 years human existence? Can we make it anyhow? So I noticed in my honest reflection that due to really reading what's going on, I thought, where is my hope? Is there? And so what I found very useful. Well, I did exercises in the work that reconnects with John Macy's project, where I had to, in a meditation, to connect with children of children over 200 years. So in 2221, so the Dhammapitika in 200 years, writing a letter to Dhammapitika now. And so I did intuitive writing in which I made time frames from now to then and from there to then. So I wrote a letter from Dhammapitika 200 years further in time back to me to now, and what I can recommend the practice. There came a lot of metta and the concern, but at the end, we made it, and the way we made it, it's of course with a lot of pain and suffering and dukkha. In 200 years, well, the letter I wrote from there to here is, so we made it, and it gave me encouragement. And so for me, maybe the start with the acknowledgement of the pain, the acknowledgement of the insecurity, the acknowledgement of your own dirty hands as a human and in your life yourself. Go to retreat and you go by car, you are polluting environment, etc. So then I noticed from the acknowledgement can start a change in heart, I would say a new seeing, and this new seeing is founded on reverence and on gratitude. And I feel I'm more integrated in my activist life and Dhammachari life of the reference and gratitude, which is enriched. And this enrichment as a birth could start first after acknowledging the pain and to go through that. And
I think that is very important as a skill, both for myself and to teach in society. And I was quite I'm inspired by a man called Timothy Morton.
Yeah.
He wrote a book first called Being Ecological, which is just very good, very highly recommended. And then he wrote a book called Dark Ecology. And I think he is playing on the deep ecology of Arne Næss. Yeah. And in the dark ecology, he just really acknowledges this, what you're saying, that, you know, it can be overwhelming when you take the state of the world in, and in particular when you're listening to the news. And of course, we mainly get news of what is going wrong, and so I think this raises a number of questions that maybe we could raise some of them. And I just want to say that Timothy Morton, you know, he has kind of his two beautiful responses. One is that he says, you really have to find, you know, when you are overwhelmed, you really have to go for some chocolate.
Yeah.
And of course, this is special chocolate. It's not the sugary thing, but it's a delight. It's something you can actually, when you feel really overwhelmed, you can go. And for me, usually I've just moved house, but I used to live by a river, and just to go about and sit by the river and just watch the water run by. That would be just a way to really to calm down and reconnect and to breathe. So he says, you know, we all have to find our sources of chocolate.
Yeah.
And then the other thing about him is that he knows so much about this negative stuff. And when you listen to him, he's just so playful about it. Yeah. And he creates these art exhibitions, and he's just amazingly creative and light.
Yeah.
And so I think this is a beautiful combination.
Yeah, it's lovely. Lovely. Yeah. I would add my English, the word naughty is not completely appropriate. But Vajra Yogini is challenging me to be fully committed. There is nothing to hide. It's full. The red, it's with the passion. So the passion of my life living as a Dhammachari, but in this world where that is what we're talking about. Double bodhisattva. She's also sky dancer, and it's also dancing.
Yeah.
Also encouraging me to not only to love, but also to love, to make human pleasure.
Yeah.
And to find the enjoyment and the art and the in my work as an activist, we also try to add the humor and not only the stress, the negativity, and the passive aggression, what we don't want, what is the reality. So we work with arts, a lot of artisans, and with poetry and film, and we're making a play. It's a serious play. I mean, it's a big issue. We are with a lot of course, it's not. It's very complex. It's very painful. But I also try to see it as a play. Yeah. Yogini is challenging me to develop that. So my my climate engagement. Of course, I cry. I cry, of course. But I also have a smile. And when this, okay, maybe I can. Okay, I will tell you this letter from Dhammapitika 200 years after.
Yeah.
I said, so life is short, life is temporary. Life is like a fire you give, you hand over to next generation. And life does not belong to you, you belong to life. And then my Dhammapitika 200 years ahead, he said, the love with which you live your life now, that's the only true seed which counts for the happiness in future. And then I'm back to this artificial limb. There were hundred thousands of amputees who had no limbs, which is a tragedy. But every limb which was given was made with love. And that was the only seed which counted. And the growth counts from the love and not from the plan. And I feel when we having an eco project or eco plans of what we do, we start with the dedication and not with the huge plan. We start with the dedication, the love, and that's what I learned from my India period. So the fire is within, and we enrich it with each other, and we can change things.
I think we are, in a sense, we are changing all the time, and I think the choice is what direction and how skillful or how efficient or so I wondered also, because preparing for this conversation, we kind of also agreed that it would be important to look at some of the pitfalls of activism or trying to live and be a sustainable world. And I think we have touched on some of them, like you mentioned the temptation to really try to convert people who don't want to be converted, and maybe also being overly idealistic. And I think, because what you point with those legs, it isn't important. And Jonathan Haidt, who talks very much about intuitive ethics and, in a sense, how to be happy. And he talks very much about how some people have a tendency to see the glass as half full, and other people have a tendency to see it half empty. And I think it is a skill to actually to do what you have done, actually look at each artificial limb that is created and celebrate those victories. And I think this is one of the things that I've learned in Triratna, to celebrate the victories, but celebrating you in Dhammapitika, for all the things you have done and your qualities, and not focus too much on what goes wrong. But having said that, I thought it would be good also to focus on what goes wrong. So I mean, you have a long life as an activist. What have you learned, probably the hard way, things to avoid or look out for when you are actually trying to live out your ideals?
I love. I had to learn that I tried for many years. I tried to create a better self, so to develop myself into a better human being. So I had my idealism in my own development. And I also thought in the beginning within Triratna, and I started 32 years ago, that to start meditating is improving myself. Like I have to make myself into a better than I am now. and but it doesn't work.
Mm.
It doesn't work to not to accept who you are. Starting point.
Yeah.
Yeah, Maslow already wrote a lot about it. This the efficiency motivation. That where my psychological maturity was not that much that I tried to develop myself to become a better person as I was in the. So I feel that's a part of loneliness, part of becoming tired, and to the past to say yes to the situation there is, including who I am, including acknowledgements. So the wisdom is not to change or to improve or to develop, but to to say yes, all inclusive. So in terms of to see the shadow, and not to deny the shadow, because then it's working in itself and it can become an evil or a devil even. Idealism can turn into aggression. Idealism can turn into ideology. Idealism can turn into very nasty situations. We've seen also politically with a lot of suffering.
And on that note, Dhammapitika, I remember myself many years ago traveling around with a delegation from Oslo in Sri Lanka, and this is before the civil war broke out again in 2004 to then 2003, if I remember correctly. And I met some of the Buddhist nationalists, and it was so painful. Because they were so strong, about, what to my mind is really a contradiction in terms like Buddhist nationalism. It really has no place in my Dharmic knowledge, but there was no way in to enter into a dialogue with these people. That's what I found then. So have you found any ways in when you meet people who are just very staunched in, their idealistic ways?
Yeah. Nelson Mandela started to learn the language of the Afrikaner farmer in order to understand them and to make himself being able to communicate.
Yeah.
I have a practice. I try to speak every week with a farmer. Well, farmers I'm not fond of because of their polluting so much. But I try to say hello to a farmer and to speak with the farmer and to hear about his job and what's happening with him. And so, and also in this big tree action, it's a national action we are now in for mentioned, which is motorway. I try to, say the enemy. It's not the enemy. It's also the friend. We have to find ways peacefully with ahimsa, with non-violence, and also non-violent communication, and also non-violent thinking, to find ways to solve it. And if idealism turns into not enough patience, or turns into intolerance, or dirty jokes, or despiting, it's good. Well, it's a good. I feel it's not working. The hero, the warrior, the Shambhala warrior on the Ekasattva path has two weapons. One is compassion, and one is insight. And insight is non-polarizing. I mean, insight is the conditions there have been make a situation which is now. And so let's be Shambhala warriors for the Ekasattva path with compassion and developing insight.
Yeah. And I think you say something important about the farmers. but that I'm actually really trying to learn something about the other's situation. And I've learned to my pain, that of really just you talk about myself and being and I think that's why the talk of this, or the title of this conversation, it's like how to talk about sustainability is important. And I can talk about my own life and my own experience, about my own pain and frustrations and dilemmas and inspirations. And that will affect those who are ready somehow to listen. And well, with the others, I'm not quite sure what to do other than, as you say, when possible, to actually to get into dialogue, because just to start shouting at each other, it just makes things worse. So what about other things like cynicism or doubt or fear? I don't know if those are, well, we touched a little bit about it, about actually this being overwhelmed by it, and because I suppose that's, and I remember when I was reading Otto Scharmer, who I think also does great work in actually really getting into dialogue to connect people with the needs of any situation. And of course, he talks about doubt, about cynicism, and about fear. And I do find it is important when I try to engage in dialogue to bring awareness about sustainability, somehow not to be angered or put down or stopped by cynical comments, which I think often is rooted in fear. But then, and then rather than to find ways of trying to see where people are coming from, and I think this is a little bit your metaphor with the farmer. It's like really trying to see where is it coming from? And I remember when I moved back to Oslo in 2001 and going to, business dinners or, eating out and being a vegan. And if there were many people around the table, I would invariably get hostile questions about why I was vegetarian, even vegan. And so after a while, I did turn it into a little game of trying to find out where something about where they were coming from, and then enter into playful dialogue. Sometimes that succeeds, and not all the time.
Yeah. And well, it's easy to judge others. It's easy to think about someone who's eating meat and that I have certain thoughts about it. It's easy. It's easy to judge the other. It's very easy. And, but it is isolating, and it's creating distances. And well, for me, I tried this meditation to do frequently in order to develop more heart space, and not to polarize between I am green and the other is not green, and neoliberal is wrong and this and that. And I can be sharp. I can sharp in debate. When it's needed, I can climb in the tree and say, I don't want it to be cut. So I have my energy, but I also have my peace to bring in that. And well, I think Bante said that metta is the most active weapon we have. Our path. So maybe something to, if we go in a little group, so we can share about how we all work on this topic. And well for me, I'm 62, but I really find ways in developing hope and perspective for future generations, much more than I expected. And also after I have read all this difficult material on IPCC, etc., etc. So we did many years ago with Dhammaketu. I was a mitra then. We did a retreat on spirituality, and all mornings we had a metta practice, and afternoons we had IPCC, Club of Rome, and all the difficult stuff. And the evening, well, we had puja, and yeah, I feel the richness of the Dhamma path, which we can really develop a metta also for ourselves and others, in combination with the fully engaged, activist life. It's enriching.